Hashem's V'asai Tivtach U'Pia Gitzal Sacha. We're now in the 11th Perek of Yehoshua. In this Perek, we're now going to be dealing with the first of the completely, so to speak, natural warring. And that is that Yavin, the Melech of Chatzor, he sends messages to a lot of kings. And this is all going to be happening in the north. The fighting actually in the north, but he sends messages to Knani in the Mizrach, Emori, Chiti, Prizi, Yebusi, Chivi. Now, Chivi had run away to the Harmon, and Knani had gone all the way to Mizrach from in the east and in the west. And so, and we had mentioned that the Canaanim were not there, and perhaps that's why it's called Eretz Canaan. But the idea is that everybody, there's an enormous amount of people that have come against the Bnei Israel, as numerous as the sand on the Sfas Hayam Larov. And that's our first clue, that this is all part of a bigger picture of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Remember, what else is supposed to be the same as the sand al Sfas Hayam? Us. And so HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really lining up the bracha that we're supposed to get with the enemy who is going to be the conduit for the bracha. Because we always know that whenever HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends, it's specifically geared for us to be and to reach our best self. And so interesting that they're considered Chachol Asher al Sfas Hayam. Now what happens is these kings, they join forces. And they literally are together in Merom, and they're ready to fight against the Bnei Israel. Vayomer Hashem al Yehoshua, Hashem says to him, Al tira mipneihem, don't be afraid of them. Ki machar ke'es hazos. Tomorrow at this time, Anochi nosin es kulam, all of them I will give to you, chalalim lifnei Yisrael. They're all going to be they're done. That's suseihem to aker. So here's the interesting thing. Nowhere else in that we've had in the Torah, in Nach, do we have the idea that Hashem is telling Yehoshua to maim the horses, the et markosehem tisrof be'esh, and burn their chariots. And the Mefarshim really go back and forth as to what in the world. We are not cruel people. First of all, we have an inyan, we have a halacha of a few things. First of all, we have the halacha of Baal Tashchis. You're not allowed to waste things. So I'm not allowed to throw out extra food, but I'm allowed to maim a zillion horses. And the second is we have the idea of we don't hurt animals. We dafka protect the animals from being hurt. So for example, we feed animals sometimes before we feed ourselves. If there is, we don't cause disruption and pain, not to people, not to animals. Even if the animal that belongs to our enemy is in pain, we help them. We have tsar balei chayim. We would never hurt animals. And here HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us to maim the animals. So first of all, we have to understand it a little bit more deeply. This is a one-time thing. This is Hashem is setting a precedent of you don't think Elav Arecha ve'Elav Asusim va'anachnu b'shem Hashem Elokeinu naskir. We don't believe that it's the horses and the chariots that are going to bring salvation, but it is only Hashem. And we cannot then make it that Hashem knows what's going to happen after the war. They're going to take all these zillion horses, and it's going to be bad. They're going to use them as idols, or on some level, they're going to think, "Wow, these glorious, majestic horses! It's our horses that solve the problem. It's their horses that were the problem." And so, horses are just not going to cut it, because it's literally a lifnei iver. It's you don't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. The Bnei Israel with so many horses, Hashem knows what happens if I give you too much. If If I give you too much, you end up forgetting me, and you end up not doing the right thing with what I give you. So I can only give it to you in a smaller dosage as long as you understand what it is and what it isn't. The bottom line is Hashem is willing to make us, cause us to name animals to be able to highlight what we know to be true, which is it's not about the wealth. It's never going to be about the wealth. Wealth doesn't bring power. Only Hashem brings power. And so here at the beginning of Nach, we have Hashem saying, I am willing to even go against the grain in order to really highlight what you need to do with the extra horses. Secondary, we understand what would happen if they took so many horses and they became obsessed with horses. What does that lead them to always doing? Going back to Mitzrayim, which is the source of horses. And Hashem says, no, I just took you out of Mitzrayim. We've come full circle. There's no way that I am going to put anything in your midst that is going to send you back to Mitzrayim. And from the Meitzar, from the chains and the ideas, the ideology of the Mitzrayim, which is, we can try to build tombs and mummify so that we can outdo nature. No, nature is not where it's at. And you have to understand the power and the value. You don't take it with you. You can put it in a pyramid, but it is still not going to lead to eternity. And so here, Hashem, just for this one time, he changes his general policy to highlight that it's an emergency situation for the Bnei Israel. It's like Yahareg Val Yavor. This is, that Hashem is willing to say, for the sake of the Jewish people's lives, I'm going to change the rules. And the rules can be changed because they're being attacked. So they are the victims of the situation. And so victims are allowed to fight back. And this is the only way to fight back. A Jew fights back with their moral and their spiritual self intact. And so here, the Jews are fighting a physical war, but ultimately Hashem says the war would not, it's not the physical war that's really the issue. It's the aftermath which is going to lead. Why do we have to wipe out the nations anyway? We have to wipe them out because they're going to be bad influences. And we send out peace treaties. If you want to follow in the way of the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, or if you want to be servants to us so that we do not take on your ideology, then, or in addition to the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, then we'll make peace with you. But no one does. And so the idea is it's really an ideological war more than anything else. And Yehoshua is told, Al Tira, don't be afraid. What could he possibly be afraid of? He's already proven himself to be an amazing leader. He's Moser Nefesh. He cares about Hashem. Why would he then still be afraid? So perhaps we know from Moshe Rabbeinu, what was Moshe part of his worry? Part of his worry was, first of all, okay, I'm not worthy. Okay. But also maybe the Jews aren't worthy. And here Yehoshua is doing the same thing. Maybe the Jews are still not worthy enough to have this miracle. Like maybe our miracles run out. Sometimes when we're in an experience where we're just feeling the brachas, there is that creeping doubt. Wait a second. When's the shoe going to drop? Is there going to be a time where I can no longer rely on the brachas of Hashem because maybe it got used up? Maybe I did pretty okay, but I don't know. Maybe all of these beautiful brachas, Baruch Hashem, are going to be dry up. And so perhaps Yehoshua is thinking that too. Well, we've had some really good things so far, but when does the buck stop? And so Hashem says, no, don't worry. That's not the way Hashem works. That's not Emunah. Emunah isn't thinking that, Hashem's going to, it's not going to last. But rather, Emunah is the belief, no, we have to work as hard as we can to be the best Jews that we can be. And Hashem has an infinite amount of power and brachas for everyone and in all times. In any event, that's it. So Yehoshua, with all of his troops, remember he learned, Chol Am HaMelchama. He has learned from his mistakes. He's bringing a full-fledged army. And everybody goes. And Hashem, of course, delivers them into the hands of Yisrael, the enemy. They defeat them. and it's a very successful time. They crushed everyone. Levilti Hashir Lo Sarid. Not one person was able to escape. And that's exactly what Hashem commanded Yehoshua. That's what he did. And he maims all the horses, and he destroys and burns all the chariots. And then he goes to capture Chatzor, and specifically the king of Chatzor, who was really the kingpin in all of this. He kills him, and everybody. There's not one soul that survives, and Chatzor is burned down. All the royal cities and their kings, he kills everybody. And what is that? Kasher tziva Moshe Eved Hashem. Just like Hashem commanded Moshe. We have to understand that we have to follow the Torah, not the way that we interpret the Torah, but ultimately we have to follow the way we're taught. Sometimes, you might think, oh, well, that's a rational reason. Like, for example, when it comes to non-kosher food, it does make a sense. Okay, you know what? Ours, it really does make sense because it's healthier. No, it has nothing to do with that. And, when you start to give rationale and reasons for mitzvos, you're walking a fine line. You know what? I really think it would make a lot more sense, given the quality of the esrogim this year, that maybe instead of an esrog, I'm going to take the most amazing apple. Right? We just don't do that. We have their mitzvos and we have to follow in accordance with the way that Hashem gives it to us. And sometimes it doesn't seem like it makes so much sense. It just would make a lot more sense if I could just do that on Shabbos, because that would be good. It would work out so much better. We just don't do that. That's not the way our religion goes. Our religion is Hashem dictates and we follow. And sometimes we understand it and sometimes we don't. And that's what emunah, and that's what a good Jewish person who's trying very hard to follow in the ways of Hashem, that's exactly what it's all about. We have that several times in Jewish history. For example, when it came to Shimon and Levi, what they did to the city of Shechem in deference to their sister Dinah. On the one hand, like, oh my gosh. On the other hand, they took matters into their own hands, and for that they, were they justified? Were they not justified? At the end of the day, Hashem says, follow in accordance with what I say. Shaul, he got into big trouble when he didn't do that. He said, oh, you know what? I'm going to let Agag and some of the sheep go. And once you start to do that, you're playing with your own religion, and then you can't do anything. So here, we're highlighting that all of it that Yehoshua did, he did in accordance with what he was supposed to do, and nothing else. He's following exactly as Hashem commanded, and for that, we don't look negatively at all about anything that possibly happened, because we have an understanding that it's all from Hashem, and Hashem knows exactly what it is that he's supposed to do. And ultimately, Yehoshua conquers the whole region, every place, which is very exciting, because remember, Yehoshua is going to be fighting for 7 years, and then he's going to take 7 years to divvy out the land. Now, what's interesting, in the 18th pasuk, it says, Yamim Rabim Asa Yehoshua Kol Hamlachim Ha'ila Melchama. So that Yehoshua took, like we said, 7 years with all the king, a lot of time. It's 7 years. And why does it mention that he took 7 years? Why does it mention Yamim Rabim? So actually that was to his detriment, because either he, if he was doing it for his own kavod, which most likely not, because Yehoshua was Yehoshua, a really good person, and really not out of his own kavod. But perhaps he said, you know what, as long as I'm around, I know that everything's going to be okay with the Bnei Israel. They'll listen to me, it'll be good. And he knew, as we all know, people can't always sustain their good behavior. And so Yehoshua was like, no, I'm going to take a really long time. I won't finish up my task in this world. So for that amount of time, I'll give Bnei Israel even more of a chance to be good. But Hashem said, no, it doesn't work that way. Again, there's certain things that are in the hands of man, and there's certain things in the hands of Hashem. When you start to walk in Hashem's footsteps, that's when you know you've gone wrong. We know that from Yeshayahu, and what he tells the king Chizkiyahu, and who had decided, you know what, I'm not going to have any children, because even though there's a mitzvah of puravu, you know what, my kid is going to be really bad. And so why would I do that? Why would I have a menashe if I don't have to? And Yeshayahu said, no, that's not how it goes. You can't make those decisions. We can't act like God. We could try to follow in the ways of Hashem, but we certainly don't act like Hashem. And so Yehoshua is negatively viewed upon. And in fact, he died at 110 instead of 120 just for that reason. You're trying to prolong, you're trying to act like Hashem. I'm going to unfortunately show you that no, that's not the way it is. You're not Hashem and you can't do that. And so for that reason, he actually died 10 years earlier than he was supposed to be. And ultimately, we have that Yehoshua wipes out the Anakim and all the different people, and it's just constant warring. And Vayikach Yehoshua es kol haaretz kachol asher diber Hashem al Moshe vayitznena Yehoshua lanachla l'Yisrael. So what happens? Yehoshua conquers the whole land. He spends a lot of time conquering, just as Hashem had promised Moshe. And then he, his next job, as we mentioned, is going to be for the 7 years of dividing up the territories. And so what we learn from here is that Hashem wants to really hone in and set a precedence right in the early stages of what is truly of Ein Melech Noseh B'Ro'av Chayil, like what we say in davening. It's Hinei Sheker Sus L'Tshua. It's not the horses, and it's not the armies, but it's really Hashem. And Hashem really wants for us to follow in His ways. And remember, we've moved away from a time where everything is a miracle. But ultimately, so we have to put in our effort. But even when we're putting in our effort, Hashem says, I will be there. I'm going to take care. And sometimes you're going to understand what I do, and sometimes you're really not. But part of being in an emunah relationship with Hashem is to know that even so, that's it. Hashem will take care. And Hashem can give a huge amount of bracha, even more than one would even imagine. We don't want that the brachas that we get are just the ones that we can think of in our head, but rather we want that Hashem, He runs everything. He knows exactly which would be the best brachas for us. And so Yehoshua can't act like Hashem, and the people can't pretend that they are Hashem. We have to all stay in our own lane. We stay in the lane of just following in Hashem's footsteps, and Hashem does the rest. And in that way, this is a very important lesson early on in the Jewish history that we can inculcate and we can think about even throughout all the time.